The best thing I did in the film was the casting of the key creative components. Fundamentally, that would have been, I think, Hugh as director, certainly Colin as writer.
I did endless research for the film. I went to the National Film Archives and said, what have you got on the 1924 Olympics? Abrahams and Little, who won the gold medals. And I sat there looking at these two young men on silent film and said, don't worry, boys, I'll make a good job of it. And that's when I committed myself to them and their sense of right and wrong in the form of athletic prowess. What more could you find? You know, it's absolutely a gift for me. I interviewed everybody who was still alive. Now, I just missed Harold Abrahams. He died, I think, 2 weeks before I started on the film.
Colin took himself along to the memorial service, and that was where the idea for the beginning and end of the film came. Also, and there was another reason, we were very keen that the film shouldn't be seen as just a period piece. We wanted to place those men in as close as we could to a contemporary context. And that was echoed both in the first and the last lines of the movie. I mean, these men really did live. They lived in our lifetime. Chariots of Fire essentially is about class conflict. So when you're listening to Abrams talking about his Jewishness, it's actually Colin talking about being northern working class. And what Hugh brings to it, which is fantastic, is because Hugh is an old Etonian, Hugh is the real thing. Hugh brought that impeccable understanding of the other end of class.
I started to read the script. I got about 2/3 of the way through. I was completely involved with it. And I remember I was driving. I got as far as part of London where you come off the motorway. And I wanted to go on reading, so I started to read and drive at the same time. It's kind of a highly dangerous thing to do. And I couldn't stop it. And I started to cry at the end, you know, because it moved me so much. The script itself was very powerful. And all the actors in London wanted to play these parts. However, we could not find Harold Abrahams and we could not find Eric Liddell.
In the case of Eric Liddell, we're looking for a man who all we knew about him was that he was wonderful. Anyone you talked to who knew known Eric Liddell just said, well, of course, he was the most wonderful man that ever lived, the kindest man, the nicest man. Well, to play a kind, nice, wonderful man is not easy.
We went to see a play and Ian Charleson was in it, and David and myself went to the theatre together that evening, and we halfway through we looked at each other and we just winked at each other and nodded. That was our boy.
I believe that God made me for a purpose. For China. But he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure.
My real terror was that he would turn the part down. I subsequently discovered that he was equally terrified that we wouldn't offer it to him.
We couldn't find Harold Abrahams. We couldn't find that quality that was needed, that aggressive, proud, slightly arrogant, driven quality that he had to be the proper Harold Abrahams. Anyhow, we continued, and finally somebody said, go and see Ben Cross. We think he could play this part.
Well, if you can't take a beating, perhaps it's for the best.
I don't run to take beatings. I run to win. If I can't win, I won't run.
Certainly Harold Abrahams, as written in the script, was an absolutely magnetic character. And I desperately wanted to play the man. He was very, very, very complex, and there was something almost unlikable about the man. But at the same time, you understood what his drive was.
We cast Ben Cross, who doesn't happen to be Jewish, but he had the pugnacity and the determination and the sense of chip that we were looking for, and he has it as a man. I mean, that's the way he is.
Ben had a kind of focused, driven intensity about him. And Ian was utterly beguiling. He was completely charming.
I've always maintained that the character he played of Eric Liddell was a far harder challenge for an actor than my character of Harold Abrahams. And I was utterly in awe of him.
Each of the actors had so clear a sense of who they were. They brought the characters so strongly to the process.
Then we had to cast all the rest, and our policy was to have the young unknowns and surround them with the most superb, experienced English actors. John Gielgud, Lindsay Anderson, Ian Holm. And that's the support for the film.
What we did need, because of our contract with 20th Century Fox, was what were termed some marquee names. And that's where I was able to persuade Brad Davis, who had starred in Midnight Express, and Dennis Christopher, who had starred in Breaking Away, to both play cameos for us.
I just got this phone call, and it was David Putnam calling me, asking me to do him a favor. And I thought, David Putnam asking me to do him a favor? I mean, what could that possibly be? And he asked me if I would spend a couple of weeks over there, and it seemed like it would be great fun to go over there and be in a movie that I knew John Gielgud was going to be in, and so I jumped at the chance to do it.
The acting ability is, of course, very key. In this particular film, it wasn't the only important thing. They had to have a physical ability. One of the requirements was these actors are prepared to go into a period of 2 to 3 months, maybe longer, training, constant training, and to do it and not to shirk it, and to get better, to build up their muscles and to build up their speed and build up their durability.
I treated them like athletes. You know, maybe not very good athletes, but you treat them like athletes, you train them like athletes, and you make them start thinking like athletes.
I remember on one occasion he said, I just want to keep you sprinting up and down, keep doing 100 until you're ready to vomit, because as sure as hell is what any decent athlete will have experienced. But he just wanted to get across the fact that if you want to get anywhere, you have to hurt, and he certainly had us hurting some of the time.
The character of Harold Abrahams in the true story, he starts off at 19 years old and progresses to 24 years old. I was 32 when I played that movie, and to be totally unfit, that's a challenge.
I remember the process of getting these guys in shape. I always remember that I had them all up at my house in St. Albans, one at a time, so that I could find out what their physical background was, which was pretty much zero. I always remember Ian Charleson came up the first day, and he was limping as he came into the house. This was before we'd started training. And I said, well, what's happened, Ian? Oh, he said, I was running for bosses and I pulled a muscle. I thought, Jesus, we're going to have to train these guys to be Olympic athletes in 4 months. And he's pulled a muscle already.
I don't think I've ever run so much and hurdled so much. I hated the hurdling, by the way. I would have paid money not to have done any hurdling. At school, that was the one bit of sport I didn't want to do because it looked so uncomfortable. Can you imagine if anything happens? But no, actually, I enjoyed the running. It was 3 months of pretty intense stuff, and it made a great difference to the actors involved, and we became very friendly. And when we came to film, it was fantastically easy to do the acting because we knew each other so well.
They went through the agony, those lads. And it shows in their whole attitude to athletics in the film.
This was my first film, feature. I made lots of documentaries, commercials, but I wasn't used to putting a 2-hour piece together. So obviously I had certain apprehensions about it. And obviously to begin with I was very nervous. The first day was very nerve-wracking. John Gielgud and Lindsay Anderson, I had to deal with them on the first day. But Lindsay was very, very helpful. Gave me tips about direction and how to deal with actors. The schedule was very hard. There were so many moves. It was a big film in a way. It had a big feel about it.
The night before we went up to start shooting, David and Hugh made us go to a little cinema in Soho, and we watched Lawrence of Arabia.
I wanted to show that we're going to make an epic film out of this rather small story of 2 runners in the 1924 Olympics. I wanted to have a bigger feeling to it.
For the sake of your college and your country, seize this chance, rejoice in it, and let no power or persuasion deter you in your task.
I had no idea of the scale of the movie, and then I turned up on the set and I thought, my God, this is a movie. I had no idea. Then I spent 2 days in a room with Sir John Gielgud, together with Lindsay Anderson, a formidable director. And then for the last 2 days, I was locked in an even smaller room with Ian Holm, who is the consummate actor's actor. And it was totally overwhelming. And I remember going home, and when I got home, I fell into my wife's arms, and I absolutely bawled my eyes out. And she said, what's wrong? And I said, it doesn't get any harder than that. The toughest week I have ever done in my life as an actor, and I've been an actor now for more than 30 years, was the first week's filming of Chariots of Fire.
The biggest challenge was trying to make what on the page was an expensive movie for a very limited budget. We had to complete every single day's work that day, irrespective of what the weather was like, irrespective of what obstacles we had. We moved around Scotland a good deal, and we couldn't have any days off. We had to shoot Sundays because we were doing a lot of street scenes, so we had one day off, and frequently we were travelling. on the day that we had off. Fortunately, and this is the greatest compliment I can pay to British crews, when a British crew knows that it's backed up against the wall, they are amazing, absolutely amazing. And the guys on this film came through for me time and time and time and time again.
I've always felt that you made the best of what you've got. I mean, locations have got their own things you have to take care of. All of those you can work with.
We started shooting about 2 months after Reds, and we'd booked exactly the same costumes, because the same period, same costumes, many of the same props, and Reds overran massively in terms of its time. And we couldn't get hold of our costumes. We ended up having to scramble around, make stuff, get stuff from Italy. We had a most miserable and difficult time.
The dresses were as fragile as a butterfly's wing. One of them disintegrated on me as we filmed. The fabric just parted. We double-sided the dress to me so that we would get to the end of the scene. And it broke my heart that it should be in shreds by the end, but at the same time I was thinking, well, it will be on film forever.
I remember Alice Krieger takes me to a restaurant after her show, and there was one take when the camera was over her shoulder, and she was asking me a question, and I'm talking to her about something, and suddenly her stockinged foot is firmly in my crutch and performing little circles. Hugh Hudson had whispered in her ear because he wanted some underlying sexual tension between the two of us. And in that moment, he got it. Actually, I've never said this before. It has to go on record. There was no faking it. Ian actually was faster than me. So as much as I'm prepared to admit that now, perhaps all these years afterwards, at the time, it really sort of annoyed me.
Ian was very funny. He came to my house one night. He said, I've got to find out about coaching, Tom. So he spent all night just bleeding me of everything I could tell him about coaching. And he was just like a sponge. You could see this, I've got it. And then when we actually started filming, Ian had a walking stick. And I was doing this high knee pickup exercise. Ian says, could I use my stick and put that in front of him? And he'd try and hit the stick with his knees. Now that's the creative actor thinking differently.
We had a period when we got to town, when we got to Liverpool, they put us through a training camp. But they actually kind of filmed some of this. We got into the costumes and did our boot camp in that, and they would have sort of somebody wandering around with a camera taking some footage of us doing whatever we were doing to kind of get in shape. But it was sort of retro training in the sense that it was the kind of training that you would have done then. That's ergo us doing bicycle things on our back and lifting little dumbbells and doing jumping jacks and things like that, which were thought of to be the way you worked out in those days.
The main challenges were to make everything look real. That was the main challenge, to make the sequences look real, to make the races look real. You know, to just give the general feel of what it was like in the 1920s.
The very idea of recreating the Olympics, from the arrival to the meets to all the placements and the heats, it was just so exciting to me.
With Abrams, what we had to do is to identify this very serious nature of this man, a very serious guy. So everything was terribly focused and down the lane. In one of the sequences, we've got the lane blacked out on either side, you notice. That was one of my ideas, where you just see this tunnel, which is the way sprinters should operate.
I went over to meet Jackson Schultz. He was the New York Thunderbolt. And I said, what do you remember about Harold Abrahams? He said, I remember his ass. Because that's all I saw of him.
One of the big problems I had in the film was to make sure that the real athletes didn't win the races.
These guys, I mean, they would fire the gun and guys would take off like crazy because, you know, there's a couple of, there's a few principal actors and the rest are pretty much extras. And they're all thinking that if they're in the front, they're going to be filmed. So everybody wants to win the race from countries that never even qualified in this race. Or suddenly the guy from, you know, Albania is up there running neck and neck with the guy that's actually supposed to win the race.
We took a real chance on Terry Rawlings. It was his first editing assignment. And Terry brought a great deal to the film, a huge amount to the film.
I came up with an idea which Hugh agreed to cut all the film but not cut the Olympic Games part of it. Because what I wanted to do was to get all the picture done so we knew the relationships with all the boys that were involved in the races. Because I thought once we've established that, we would know how to play the Olympic Games. We would know how they would react to each other winning or losing.
We didn't want to make it just a sports film, in which case you would just run it like that, you know, the 10.2, 10.4. So we come up with the obvious solution, which is doing it in slow motion. And each one was calculated how slow we wanted to do it. It was done in advance. I had a sheet, and we knew we had the cameras there, a number of cameras. We shot everything with multiple cameras. It's been much criticized by people that how can you do that? It's corny. It's it's derivative. So what? It works. It works dramatically. It works brilliantly in the film, I think.
Because Hugh had given me such wonderful material to work with, good coverage of everything, I thought, why not I try and turn it into a ballet? Because it felt then we could really go through these events with the runners and know how they feel. I felt when I was halfway through it that we had a successful film on our hands.
And music, it's is a language of the soul. And if you are precise and if you say the right things with music to the soul, then you're going to be understood. This opening shot, people running, we almost had another music for this because Hugh Hudson, when he shot this scene, he used one of my other themes and he liked it very much. So when he asked me to do the music of the movie, to score the movie, he said, you do the rest and we keep, it's yours anyway, we keep this theme for the beginning. And I said, but maybe I can do something else. He said to me, no, you can't beat this one. This is really great. I wrote the score, but I was not very happy because I wanted to do something better for the beginning. And then, the last minute, I succeeded to convince Hugh and David to just play the Chariots of Fire we know. And if they like it, they keep the new one. If they don't like it, they keep the old one. So thank God they keep the new one. And that's why we have Chariots of Fire.
I'm eternally grateful to Van Gelsum. I mean, you could say that 40% of the film's success was the music.
I knew it was the defining thing of my career, that if this film didn't work, I probably shouldn't be in the business. But I knew it was good. But on the other hand, I didn't have any kind of absolute validation. For example, I screened it one evening to a large group of people from the Sunday Times. And the screening just went badly. I don't know what was wrong. The same movie that you saw just went badly, and they walked out, and I knew they hated the film. And I just sat there on my own in the screening room, just devastated. That if these people, some very nice people in Sunday Times, didn't like it, who on earth was going to like it?
At a certain point, we needed to try and get American involvement in the film. And we screened it to a number of studios, turned it down.
We attempted to get domestic distribution from one of the studios, and we ran it for the then head of distribution, who saw it, came to see the film. Halfway through the film, said he needed just to run up to the loo, and he never ever came back. We never saw him again. And we ended up, thank God, in the hands of a team of people, both the Ladd Company and the Warner Brothers people, who loved the film and treated it like a newborn child.
And then it started its sort of run. It got a raw film performance, which was perfect for this type of film, that did very well in England, and then went to America. And then it got nominated with 7 nominations. It sort of started to sweep America.
The winner is Chariots of Fire.
We've taken what is absolutely a Cinderella picture and awarded it this. You come to see it in droves. It's absolutely extraordinary. 3.5 years ago, I started out with Colin, Welland, and the director, Hugh Hudson. Could he please stand with me? We've been together 3.5 years. I'd hate not to be with him now.
I am very happy to say I was right there in the Dorothy Chandler Theatre. And when they said Best Picture, I leapt into the air, straight up into the air. And 2 seconds later, I found myself in the aisle. And I must have charged past a lot of people. And I was standing in the aisle. And I was just hopping and jumping with joy.
The great thing about Chariots was we didn't ever dream it was going to be the success it was. That wasn't a purpose, to make an Oscar-winning film. The purpose of everybody in the film was to make it right and make it true.